and Columbia. And I haven't really gotten emotional much in my political career, but seeing the opportunity that these adult high schools provided for people who had gone through various experiences, and by some, admittedly, their own mistakes, hadn't received a diploma in high school. And what these adult high schools did is allow those community members, those individuals, a second chance at not just receiving a GED, but receiving a bona fide education, a diploma, and an opportunity to get back into the workforce. And to see how much it meant to them meant a lot to me. And so when we had a chance to expand from 4 high schools to 5 high schools, if you think through our Missouri map, the obvious missing area is Kansas City. I was excited to jump at the opportunity with this piece of legislation. And so what House Bill 447 does is it allows for a 5th high school to be implemented in Kansas City, and all of the changes you see are just adjusting that implementation. It also changes the implementation or the oversight of these high schools from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to the Department of Social Services. Allows for 5, and then also makes all of this funding subject to appropriation. Additionally, there was another piece added on in the House, which is a residency requirement. And I know there's some familiarity on the committee with this, but basically when a person is first admitted into a residential care facility, what this would do is ensure that the school in which they were domiciled in is the school that would be used to calculate the amount of funding or the reimbursement for that residential care facility as they administer the education of that individual. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'm open for any questions.
Thank you. Any questions for the representative? Seeing none. Anybody speak in favor, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, David Winton here on behalf of MERS Goodwill, Epworth Residential Care Facility, as well as Goodwill of Eastern Kansas and Western Missouri. I want to go on record in support of the legislation. Thank Representative Davidson for working on this and appreciate the time of the committee. I believe there is new language that we'll be using. I know Senator Beck has been working hard on this language that we'll be putting into hopefully a committee sub at your discretion that will kind of get to where we've all arrived in terms of a deal. But we really appreciate the time. This committee's always supported this effort on adult high schools. These schools have been amazing. We have right now there's 1,100 individuals throughout the different schools that are participating and getting their high school diploma, as well as getting a secondary certificate and kind of starting a new life. So we're really excited. Thank you so much for your patience.
Any questions? Senator Serpoy, go ahead.
Thank you. Dave, will you walk me through why moving this from DESE to social services?
You bet. So Senator, this program, when we first started it, one of the top things that we thought was really important as MERS Goodwill was that every diploma that was issued through an adult high school looked like, was clearly the same as a diploma you would get when you're 17 or 18 years old out of a regular high school. And so for that purpose, we worked with DESE to make sure that what we were doing comported with their requirements on a diploma, which they do. But this program has always been a workforce program. Education is a means for this population to get to a better job, a better economic situation, and self-sufficiency. All of the work we do currently, all of the reporting, all of the billing, all of the conversations, all happens with the Family Support Division underneath the Department of Social Services. Additionally, all of the money, with the small exception of some of the daycare money, also exists and resides within the Department of Social Services. It's just a better fit at this point.
If this happens, I mean, is there any fear in 10 years you lower the standards since once you're away from the educational kind of place?
We can't statutorily lower the standards. So
Okay.
the statute's pretty prescriptive when it comes to things like the diploma, what we expect out of the students, the metrics that are expected. That's all, even though it's subject to appropriations, all those metrics are in your statute.
Okay. Do you know the site in Kansas City they're looking at to put one in?
We do not have a site located in Kansas City. We would have to bid on this. Like,
Okay.
this will be subject to a bid out of social services. You know, Goodwill is clearly very interested in this.
Okay.
We will put our best foot forward and hopefully be
All right.
successful.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions? Thank you. Seeing anybody else testify in favor? Anybody for informational purposes, or anybody testify against? Anybody for informational purposes only? Okay, that concludes our hearing on House Bill 447. I move we enter executive session. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. We're in executive session. I want to exec on Senate Bill 647. This is my bill dealing with the Sheriff's Retirement Fund. I move that Senate Bill 647 be brought before the committee. Do I have a second? I have a second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The bill is before the committee. I have a committee sub. It ends in .02C. Does everybody have a copy? So some of the things that differs is the regarding the court costs for the Sheriff's Retirement Fund. Modifies becomes to an is. Modifies this subsection to herein. Modifies employers to employee. Removes the provision regarding the refunds of contributions to beneficiaries. Inserts a provision regarding membership in other state or local retirement or pension systems. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. I move the Senate committee substitute for Senate Bill 647 be adopted. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. I move that Senate committee substitute for Senate Bill 647 be voted do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. Matt, please call the roll to vote Senate committee substitute for Senate Bill 647 out of committee do pass.
Senate committee substitute for Senate Bill 647. Senators Bernskoetter.
Aye.
Aye. Searpoy. Aye. Beck. Aye. Black. Aye. Bratton. Huff. Razor. Aye. 5-0.
By your vote of 5-0, the motion carries. House Bill 402 is a definition of a hospital. This is Representative Henderson's bill. I move that House Bill 402 be brought before the committee. Do I have a second? I do. All those in favor say aye. All opposed say no. The ayes have it. The bill is for committee. I move that House Bill 402 be voted out of committee do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. Matt, please call the roll to vote out House Bill 402 out of committee do pass.
House Bill 402. Senators Bernskoetter.
Aye.
Aye. Searpoy. Aye. Beck. Aye. Black. Aye. Bratton. Huff. Razor. Aye. 5-0.
By motion, or your vote of 5-0, the motion carries. We have one more, House Bill 417. This is also Representative Henderson bill dealing with employee skills grants. I move that House Bill 417 be brought before the committee. Do I have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. The bill is before committee. I have a committee substitute. It ends in 05C. Okay, so Senator Henderson, or no, Representative Henderson actually presented on the substitute last week, and it also adds a provision that you can't double dip. So those are the changes to the substitute. Any questions on the substitute? Seeing none, I move that Senate committee substitute for House Bill 417 be adopted. Is there any discussion? All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. I move that Senate committee substitute for House Bill 417 be voted do pass. Do I have a second? I have a second. Matt, please call the roll to vote Senate Committee Substitute for House Bill 417 out of committee do pass.
Senate Committee Substitute for House Bill 417. Senators Bernskoetter.
Aye.
Aye. Searpoy. Aye. Beck. Aye. Black. Aye. Bratton. Huff. Razor. Aye. 5-0.
5-0, the motion carries. I move we exit executive session. Do I have a second? And all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes have it. We're out of executive session. Representative Dinkins, go ahead whenever you're ready with the conveyance property.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. For the record, Representative Chris Dinkins, representing Shannon, Reynolds, Iron, Washington, Wayne, Madison, and Bollinger counties. I have a simple bill. It's just some land conveyances from MoDOT and OA. They've passed out of committee and off the floor with no opposition. Transferring some land from MoDOT from DNR to MoDOT, where they have moved a bridge, and some other ones. That's in Iron County, and then I have one in Stone and Pike. They've all been rolled together to make it simpler.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody testify in favor, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Erin Hutchison, liaison for the Missouri Department of Transportation. We'd like to thank the sponsor, Representative Dinkins, for this. We had, as she mentioned, a bridge project in Iron County that moved the bridge over. It's a conveyance from DNR. And then our Pike County conveyance is in order to sell some excess property.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody else testify in favor?
Hannah Swan with the Office of Administration. We also would like to go on record in support of this bill.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Anybody else testify in favor? Anybody testify in opposition? Anybody to testify for informational purposes? That concludes the hearing on House Bill 802, 807, and 886. Senator Roberts, go ahead when you're ready. Let's do your conveyance first, please.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Bill 612 is a simple land conveyance bill which will facilitate a needed infrastructure improvement in my district. The existing Compton Avenue Bridge is half a century old. The pedestrian sidewalks are too narrow and cracked to adequately service residents in wheelchairs or on bicycles, and the hand railings are significantly lower than present requirements. It's situated between the Chaffetz Arena and the soon-to-be-completed St. Louis Topgolf and Target, as well as SLU Hospital. It's an important artery connecting the neighborhoods of north and south of Interstate 64, and this land conveyance will grant additional space necessary for a safer and necessary replacement bridge, complete with a protected bike lane and larger pedestrian walkway. I'm excited to do a small part in this much-needed city improvement and thankful to the work of the department in approving this.
Thank you, Senator. I noticed that Representative Dinkins had, part of hers has City of St. Louis in it too. Is that the same piece or is that different?
I'm not sure. I'll have to double check that.
Okay. Any questions? Maybe the department can tell us. Anybody testify in favor? Please come forward.
Hannah Swan with the Office of Administration. To answer your question, yes, this conveyance is also on the bill that Representative Dinkins presented earlier.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody else testify in favor? Anybody for opposition? Anybody for informational purposes? Thank you, Senator. Now go ahead with your next bill, Senate Bill 217.
Again, good morning, Senators, and thank you for hearing Senate Bill 217. This is a critical fix to problems law enforcement have encountered across the state. As Sergeant Charles Wall of the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department recently stated, under current state law, there is no minimum age to lawfully possess a firearm. Missouri is one of only 2 states which do not have some form of minimum age requirement, with the other being New Hampshire. This bill is crafted to match federal language which prohibits possession of handguns to juveniles with various exceptions, including members of the armed forces, hunting, target shooting, and if a juvenile's work necessitates it, among others. In my district, there was a recent major news story about a group of children who were suspected of tampering with automobiles. Officers arrived on the scene and were quickly caught in the middle of the 2 groups exchanging gunfire. After the gun battle ended, the officers were able to apprehend 2 of the initial suspects. One was carrying a stolen Glock 19. He was 16 years old. And the other was carrying a Glock 29 equipped with an autosear. He was 15 years old. Having not witnessed who fired what shots and having no minimum age for possession of a firearm, the officers lacked probable cause to charge the 2 juveniles in this incident. The Metropolitan Police and the city's juvenile court received negative press in the aftermath because each juvenile was simply released to their parents. This harms public trust, encourages more bad actors, and places undue pressure upon our already emotionally taxed local police and juvenile officers. Worse yet, the present law fails children, and it fails the victims of gun crime. We have to look at, what is being taught to the 2 kids involved in this case. That if at 15 years old, you can't legally drive a car, but you can legally carry a handgun. And if you do, there won't be any repercussions for it. Unfortunately, a lot of our gun crimes right now are being committed by kids. And here we have the opportunity to do something about it. Thank you. I believe we have the support from many groups that are here to testify that I've worked with on this piece of legislation who can speak to their experiences, and I'd be glad to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions? Senator Serpy, go ahead.
Thank you. Senator, you say this will mirror federal law, so it's a federal crime now for kids to carry a gun,
Correct.
but it's just not enforced?
It was a federal law put into place about almost 3 decades ago in 1994, so it's been federal law for the Bush administration, the Trump administration, but our federal officers aren't really enforcing it. It's small for them, I guess is the best way to put it. So we have our local state police doing it, but then there's no state crime to charge them with at that level. Okay. So it could be kicked up, but
Rarely is? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
That's my understanding.
Any other questions? Seeing none, anybody testify in favor, please come forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. David Jackson, registered lobbyist for Greater St. Louis, Inc., which is the private sector voice for the bi-state region in the business community in St. Louis. Just want to go on record and support. I think the concept here is fairly simple. We think public safety is a big priority in St. Louis, and trying to prevent kids with guns is top of the list. So, thank you.
Any questions? Senator Bratton, go ahead.
Just briefly, Mr. Chairman. So, just last week, I think it was last week, I saw a report. It was on a national news station about St. Louis, about our prosecutor, that since she had taken office, over 12,000 cases had not been prosecuted for crime. Do you think it's more of gun laws, or do you think it's the lack of prosecution and keeping criminals feeling like it's a heyday in St. Louis because they know they're not going to be charged with crime?
Senator, I think Greater St. Louis has been clear and vocal in the media as well that the situation currently with the prosecutor is unacceptable, and something has to be done there. So, I think you've got 2 issues there to address, but we also think there's problems with kids with guns.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? Senator Beck.
Yeah, just to be clear, good morning. So I went to Greater St. Louis Inc. A few months back, and we talked, and we had this conversation amongst all the business leaders within the St. Louis area. And At the time, we weren't even really talking about this, about 12-year-olds running around carrying assault weapons on the streets, and the police not being able to do anything about it. And, you know, the senator even mentioned earlier, too, that through the Missouri State Legislature, there's been loopholes put in to the laws. One of them is, for example, if you're a 12-year-old kid, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, if you're a 12-year-old kid and you're walking down the street with a stolen toaster oven, there's a mechanism for you to get in trouble. But if you're that same kid and you have a stolen gun, all you have to do is say you didn't know it was stolen, and they let you go. I mean, that's a problem. That's a common sense problem that when I talk to people in the business community, when I talk to our police officers, it's something that needs to be handled. And we need to actually get the spine around here to do that. In my mind, if we want to grow this state, if we want to look at doing things in this state, good things, the economic engine of the state is the St. Louis region. We need to help it grow. And correct me if I'm wrong here. I mean, all those business leaders, when we had that conversation at Greater St. Louis Inc., you know, and I had the Speaker of the House was there and Pro Tem.
Yeah, I don't disagree. That's my interpretation and understanding as well.
That's the number one thing that's literally affecting people. It gives us a black eye. People see that. They don't want to come here. Conventions don't want to come here. Things, you know. And we need to take care of business. And it's not taking anybody's rights away. When you take a 12-year-old off the street with a gun in their hand, I don't see how that's taking anybody's rights away.
I would agree.
Thanks.
Any other questions? Senator Bratton?
Just to follow up on that line of questioning, I guess I hadn't heard that if a stolen firearm that cannot be confiscated by an officer. Is that correct?
You know, look, I'm not here to speak on behalf of law enforcement, and I defer to the officers and law enforcement and exactly how those proceedings go. But that's been my interpretation as well. That when you have, a minor with a gun, that it is very difficult to apprehend them if they claim it's not theirs. And so, I'm not going to speak to specifics because I've never tried to arrest anybody.
That doesn't just ring well with me. That doesn't make sense. That'd be like finding them with driving a stolen vehicle, and you can't apprehend or confiscate the vehicle that they stole because that
I would agree. It doesn't make sense.
So it sounds like that's a misinterpretation and misenforcement of what would be common sense application of stolen anything. But at any rate, so again, it sounds more like almost an enforcement as opposed to what the law is. If kids have stolen guns and we're just going to let them go with the stolen property. So, anyways, thank you.
Senator Beck?
I just want to clarify my comments. They can take the gun away. They can't do anything to the person because all they have to do is say they did not steal the gun. And if they don't have proof of that, they cannot do anything to them. However, if you're in possession of a stolen property, toaster oven, for example, microwave, whatever it is, they can prosecute you. You can't just say, well, I didn't know it was stolen. You're in possession of stolen property. When it comes to guns, it's different. And I've read the law, and I've seen what's happened, and the loopholes have been put in there. So I just want to be clear, the gun can be taken away, but the person cannot be prosecuted. Thanks.
Any other questions? Thank you. Anybody else testify in favor, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, committee members, I'm Pat Kelly, Executive Director of Municipal League of Metro St. Louis. I want to go on record in support of Senate Bill 217. The League has been working very closely with the Police Chiefs Association, which includes St. Charles, St. Louis County, and St. Louis City Police Departments. We have a real issue and problem in our area, and I think it is statewide, other large cities dealing with juveniles and crime. Anything we can do to have stronger enforcement and deterrent would be good for all of our communities throughout the state. One quick story, just yesterday afternoon, my sister-in-law was out with two friends in the Grove area of St. Louis around noon, going to lunch at a popular restaurant. They were parking their car in a public parking lot. 5 individuals ran down the sidewalk screaming. Individual jumped out of a van in the back of the parking lot. They all started exchanging gunfire with each other. There was a husband or a young lady who was standing on a sidewalk that was pregnant. She fell down trying to run away. her husband was parking the car. They were visiting relatives. They're from Illinois, visiting relatives from that were in the hospital at Barnes Hospital. He also had his own concealed carry. He pulled out his gun, started shooting. The concern there is he didn't know who these individuals were, whether they're undercover police officers or anything like that. The police were called. Nobody was apprehended, but this is happening all too often in our area. Again, anything we can do to deter these types of crimes would be good. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody else testify in favor? Please come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Marcia Hazelhorst, and I am the Executive Director of Missouri Juvenile Justice Association. We are here today to testify in support of the Senator's Senate Bill 217. We're very grateful that he brought this issue forward. It is something that has caused great concern across the state amongst chief juvenile officers who are responsible for handling youth who might be in possession of a weapon. So as the Senator already pointed out, there are a lot of reasons why we don't allow youth to do certain things. We don't allow them to drink, don't allow them to vote. We mandate, how long they have to, for the age for which they have to attend school. We don't allow them to be in possession of tobacco products. And they have rules that they have to follow because they are young people. One of the driving arguments when we raised the age of juvenile court jurisdiction on July 1st of 2021 had to do with adolescent brain development. They're still a young person developing, they act on impulse, they often don't think about long-term consequences until after something has happened. So those are a lot of the reasons why we have rules that govern what young people can and cannot do. The presenting issue currently that we are experiencing, as the Senator mentioned, it's not against the law for a young person to be in possession of a handgun. Right now, a juvenile officer can merely charge what is called a status offense. They can charge behavior injurious to self or others. A status offense is not criminal in nature. It's not against the law for any of us, but it is something that juveniles are not allowed to do because obviously when they're in possession of a gun, they act impulsively. They're going to be in situations where they might use a weapon where they otherwise may not have had that weapon if it was against the law for them to have. If they get engaged in a fight or have an issue with somebody, before they may have, had a fist fight or what have you, but now they're carrying weapons and then guns get pulled out. And then we have, a different crime that is committed. So currently it is a status offense, which basically comes with limited sanctions. The juvenile officer, there's not a lot that they can do with them. They can provide services, but sometimes these young people need to be placed in juvenile detention because they're carrying a weapon, they have a history of engaging in delinquent acts, which they present a risk to public safety. We have federal law that prohibits status offenders from being placed in juvenile detention facilities. So again, limited consequences. To your question, Senator, earlier about the possession of a stolen weapon, I think there's some confusion with respect to that. If the weapon is in fact stolen and law enforcement does have evidence to prove that it's stolen, they have probable cause, and they provide that information to the juvenile officer, they most certainly can be charged for a law violation. They're in possession of a stolen weapon. The mere defense of saying they didn't know it was stolen would not fly. As long as law enforcement has evidence to show, sufficient evidence to show that it's stolen, they would be charged. And they certainly would be. They could be and would be. The problem I think that law enforcement is experiencing, and having spoken with many juvenile officers, law enforcement believes the weapon is stolen. We believe the weapon is stolen because how else would a young person be in possession of a weapon and get that if it wasn't stolen or given to them by somebody who might have stolen the weapon? They just can't prove it. It's not reported stolen, so we don't have proof that it's a stolen weapon, and we can't file on that. I think you also had a question, Senator, about the prosecutor in St. Louis. Kim Gardner would have no authority over juveniles for offenses that they commit up to age 18. The only way she would be involved and could file on those young people would be if the juvenile officer were to certify them. If the judge certified them as an adult, they were transferred to the adult system, then certainly she would make all decisions on filing. So the decision currently to file charges on a young person lands with the juvenile officer. And so she would not be able to dictate to the juvenile officer what they should or should not file, if that makes sense. So we are seeing young people, that we're seeing an uptick, an increase in law violations that are being committed. And those youth, when they're taken into custody, have handguns on them. And we're seeing kids as young as 12 years of age in possession of handguns. And so we're not speaking to, whether or not they're hunting, or using a weapon in an appropriate manner. These are kids that are literally having handguns in their pockets. And law enforcement is able to confiscate a weapon, certainly, and I believe they do that. It's just the presenting issue comes to the ability of the juvenile officer to impose any sanctions. So with Senator Roberts' bill, this would make it a misdemeanor, so it would create a delinquent offense, a law violation, which carries a little more weight for a juvenile officer to be able to impose some sanctions that are more appropriate and adequately help to protect the safety of the community. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Any questions? Senator Beck?
So real quick, I would like to talk to you offline because I've had conversations with police officers that have had this exact situation where a teenager had a stolen gun, and they point blank told me that they can't do anything if the teenager says that they didn't know it was stolen. They can take the gun away, but they can't charge the individual. So I'd like to talk to you offline, and you show me where this is in statute and how they're misinterpreting this information, because this would be good to know. When I talk to actual folks, and this is in St. Louis County, I'm not talking about city, but St. Louis County police officers in my district that have told me this exact situation that has occurred.
And I could be wrong, Senator, but even in a situation if a youth is in possession of a stolen bike,
That's different.
It's not a defense for them to just say, I didn't know it was stolen.
That's my point, and that's my point, but we've created a loophole in the law when it comes to firearms that it's not. So if that's the case, and then these police officers are somehow misinterpreting or they're getting direction that, I think they would love to know that they would be able to at least get that individual off the street for a little bit.
Sure, absolutely.
So please show me where that is, and we can talk about it. Thank you.
And again, I think a lot of it has to do with, we believe it's stolen. I mean, we don't know how else they're getting these weapons or how they would be in possession of them. So we do believe it's stolen.
It's the proof factor that if you don't know that the teenager stole the gun, you can't, and that's the problem.
Yeah.
But I would love to talk to you offline on this.
Sure.
Because this is not really, it's a minutia of the deal, but it would be important for my police officers in my area to know that information.
Happy to do so.
Thank you.
Senator Serpoy,
Thank you.
Question?
So this will be, if we pass this will be a juvenile offense, and this will not follow them, if they behave themselves, it won't follow them into adulthood?
Correct. So they would be, as I read the language, it would be a misdemeanor offense. So they would be, as long as they're under 18 years of age, they would be handled as a juvenile. So the juvenile court would have jurisdiction and would apply the appropriate sanctions or response to the violation. When a young person turns 18 years of age, their juvenile record, if they've had formal action where a petition's filed and they actually appear in front of a judge, their record is sealed, and it can only be opened with a court order under certain circumstances, or if they go on into adulthood and they commit a serious felony, it could be used in their disposition, their sentencing information. And then if they're not ever filed on, because the juvenile officer has the authority to handle referrals informally, and a great deal of juvenile referrals are handled informally, and those records are also essentially destroyed at age 18,
Okay.
as long as they
Thank
were
you.
filed on.
Any other questions? Senator Bratton, go ahead.
So you had mentioned with the Kim Gardner, I guess I wasn't directly saying that she's, not prosecuting, juveniles. I'm more so speaking to the culture that it's fostering within the community of St. Louis that, you know, people are getting away with anything and everything and not being prosecuted. So, I mean, if it's going to breed that sort of culture of crime and you're going to get away with it, so it's fine. I guess that's my concern, as to where we're not actually, you know, laying the hammer down on people that should be, you know, put in jail and throwing away the key. Instead, they're out on multiple and multiple and multiple, to where we have people literally executing people in broad daylight. You know, so that's, I guess, more so my comment. It wasn't the fact that I know she's not, you know, she does not have that jurisdiction. But I think if we can continue to allow this sort of, you know, just chaos to ensue, that's what it's going to continue to breed. And the younger we're going to start seeing these kids commit crime. Why? Because everybody else is committing crime and they're not getting in trouble or being prosecuted for it. So I hate what has been created with this sort of just total chaos to ensue. So, but I look forward to working with the sponsor. I'm not you know, trying to, you know, I want to make sure that the streets are safe too. You know, absolutely. So thank you.
I appreciate that, Senator, and I apologize for misrepresenting I didn't mean to imply that. I was just trying to clarify, but I apologize for that. And certainly, you know, I spoke with both the Chief Juvenile Officer in St. Louis City as well as St. Louis County, and they are they are concerned about the increase in violent offenses that they're seeing from young people. Both of them have had a significant increase in their daily population in their juvenile detention facilities. They're seeing more youth that are having certification hearings, that they're unfortunately having to transfer to the adult system. So I believe that they are holding youth accountable, and you know, if this were to pass, I think it would also assist them in more accountability.
Senator Black.
Thank you. As I sat here and listened, it seems like you're close to the expert on this issue. So I'm from a different place in our state other than St. Louis, and I read in the language that it has information about my place in the world. And before you answer this question, you know, I'm of the point that we need to, this will sound off the wall for a group of people, that we need to have gun education back in schools like I had in the 1960s. We need to have opportunities for kids to go to shooting clubs and stuff like still are found where we're at. So you know what kind of mindset that you're talking to a person and overall belief value on this. I've not really heard, how do you see this being used to take guns away? I've heard if we find somebody, if a kid has this, etc., the shooting that the gentleman talked about earlier, there was surely some level of crime that did happen during that incident that would cover that issue. I see this as, we use the word red flag, and you know how that gets used with both parties, etc. I see this as an opportunity. In an opportunity, I say, will somebody be walking the street and trying to stop 16-year-old, 14-year-old and disarm them? Does this give them the ability to do that? Or is it still going to end up being an after-the-fact, another piece that we have, another charge that we can have? Is it anything that's going to preempt?
Sure. So I think it does a couple of things. I think one, if youth start to understand that it is against the law for them to be in possession of a handgun, because currently it's not. So they know they can have it on their possession and not be charged with anything more than a status offense. So I think it could act to deter young people from being, you know, believing that it's okay for them to carry. It's not going to deter every youth. If they're intent on carrying a gun, they're going to carry a gun. But at least there is a little bit more teeth now. If this were to pass, it gives a little more teeth to a consequence that could be imposed to maybe deter them from carrying that weapon the next time. Certainly, if they commit an offense, a law violation, and they also have a gun on them, the juvenile officer can respond to that law violation that they committed, and handle that appropriately. But from law enforcement's perspective, and I don't want to completely speak for them, but I've spoken with lots of law enforcement about this issue, because their concern is, if they're stopping a young person who's committed a delinquent offense and they're packing, they have a handgun on them, they act impulsively, I think it increases the likelihood for someone to get hurt in a situation that could have maybe just been, and I don't mean to minimize when I say just been a law violation, but it could make the difference between someone really getting seriously harmed, particularly law enforcement. We also know kids are using these guns to hurt other children. I mean, they're fighting and shooting at each other, again, because they're allowed to carry that gun. So I think it could act in a couple different ways to assist with just that overall deterring of a youth carrying a weapon. Law enforcement, currently, if law enforcement, sees a young person visibly carrying a gun, or acting in a manner that they shouldn't, and they have sufficient reasonable belief that a young person's doing something that they're not supposed to, they can stop and talk with them, and they can, if they have a gun, then they can address the issue. But again, there's no charge for that. It would be a status offense unless they can show that it's a stolen gun. And I hope I'm answering your question. It's hard to certainly predict, but I know it's not the goal of juvenile officers to try to interfere with anyone's right, to carry a weapon. We just, arguably, we don't let kids do lots of things for many reasons because they are children, and so them being in possession of a handgun seems to be one of those issues that we probably should not be letting them do. And I believe that the gun education, all those things are good for kids. So.
Okay, well, thank you. My last part's a statement we can talk about later. I've tried to pass a bill to make huffing certain substances illegal. This huffing, as a school teacher, we had to lock up air duster and put X on a can to be able to put it out, and we went through all that stuff, and then I have a friend get killed by somebody that was huffing. Of course, the fact that she got killed, that was a crime, but the fact that she was huffing was not. And people have just totally went berserk over the fact that I think that we ought to be able to charge them enough that somebody in the system can say, here, you need to go get help before things get worse. And I see this law almost being the same thing. Instead of going after the real reasons, we're doing this on the side, and will we really make any changes? So thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you. Thank you for your testimony. Anybody else testify in favor, please come forward.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jackie Barget. I'm a registered lobbyist here on behalf of the City of St. Louis. I will not repeat anything that's already been said, but I will just say our new chief of police that started a couple months ago, this is one of the first things that he flagged, and he's very, very supportive of this legislation, just the high, and I should have brought the numbers with me, so I will get these and get them to you, but the amount of juvenile crimes that are committed and the amount of juvenile crimes that are committed with a weapon, specifically with a handgun, I'll make sure that you all have those. And then just in addition to that, our Office of Violence Prevention in the City of St. Louis, as well as our Director of Health, are also very, very supportive of this legislation, just for if this could reduce the amount of youth suicides or the amount of youth accidental deaths, that would be amazing for the City of St. Louis.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, thank you. Anybody else testify in favor? Anybody testify in opposition? Anybody for informational purposes? That concludes our hearing on Senate Bill 217. I may have a motion. We adjourn. Do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. We are adjourned.